right now. John McMullen is with us here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. They had their own controversy to deal with yesterday over at the NovaCare Complex as the Eagles continue OTAs. But business as usual today, John?
Yeah, I think it was. Obviously, from a local standpoint, the Sixers thing helped. That took some people away. The national people are gone. So I think ultimately it'll start to go away now. And it was back to football unless somebody else engages the president. So I think the Eagles, as I said yesterday, were smart to stop doing that. I think the NFL should take a page out of their book and also stop. But we'll see if they do, because sometimes it's difficult when people who have that kind of obviously bully pulpit insult you. It's tough to stay quiet, even if that's the best strategy.
John, yesterday we talked about that Wentz was cleared for 7-on-7 work. Today he looked, I was reading some stuff that said, man, not only does he look good, he looks almost like he's got more zip on the ball and, more velocity than he did at this time last year.
Yeah, he's looked great. I think everyone said that. I think we're all surprised at how much he's able to do less than, 6 months off of surgery. So it's all positive from this standpoint. This is the end of OTAs. We have mandatory minicamp next week. Then you have your time off. I don't think there's any question that things are advancing even quicker than the most optimistic person might have thought. And that's a good thing. If he wasn't going to be the MVP last year, he's certainly going to be second in the voting. So anytime you can get a player of that caliber back on the field as quickly as possible, it's always positive. And I think he's going to be there. I've said it a lot, and I think he's going to be there week 1.
Yeah, sure. The video that I saw, it is. I got to be honest again.
If there wasn't a brace, you'd think he's 100%. You think he's normal.
Totally surprised I am at where he is.
Yeah, I'm not, just because I know how hard he works, and I know people who aren't around him as much as we get to be around him. I think all athletes kind of, let's face it, they can get back quicker than the average human being. But then when you start talking about amongst the group of athletes, there are very few that work as hard as Carson Wentz. The Eagles happen to have another one in Darren Sproles, same type of individual who just works and works and works and works. And if there's a sort of conventional timetable, we talked about it a lot, for 6 to 9 months for an athlete, 9 months for the ACL and LCL, which is what Carson had. So if that's the average timetable, he's going to come in under that.
John, some interesting stuff today at Eagles OTAs, as well as, it was Sidney Jones last week. Now today, Ronald Darby saying, hey, let me see how your slot work is.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, because Jim Schwartz had said to us last week that he was going to roll a lot of guys in that position to try to figure out what his best option is to replace Patrick Robinson, who's now in New Orleans. But when he mentioned all the names, he did not mention Ronald Darby. And all of a sudden, we show up today, and it's Ronald Darby playing the slot corner in the nickel defense, with Russel Douglas inserted into his normal spot at right cornerback, Jalen Mills opposite that. He's rotating everybody. You mentioned Sidney Jones. Devontae Ballsby has been sort of a star of the spring. Jalen Mills has gotten some work there. And then you talk about the second team, Avonte Maddox, the rookie, DJ Killings, a lot of bodies rolling in and out, but this one was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, and you keep mentioning Ballsby. You wrote about him, and I keep hearing a lot of good things about him. Here's a guy that was an undrafted guy a couple of years ago, Division II player, but he's got some interesting measurables. He's got great speed, and it seems that here we are 3 years into his career that maybe this raw athlete is starting to, grow into potentially a contributor.
Yeah, Jim Schwartz alerted all of us to Devontae Ballsby. He told us when he spoke to us that if he was on the practice squad last season, but he would have been very comfortable playing him if an injury popped up. He thought he was ready to be a member of this team last year. And he has looked really, really good this spring. And, you temper that and say the pads aren't on and all of that. Because I think one of the issues with Ballsby has been, you mentioned his speed. He ran a 4.22. It was wind aided, but that's what he ran at his pro day. I mean, he is really, really fast. But when he broke in, he was under 180 pounds, and he's a 6'2" guy, so he's really slight. Over the years, he's gained some weight. He's now up to about 190, so he's better able to handle the physical part of the game, and we'll see. But I can tell you Jim Schwartz likes him a lot, and just from the way he talks about it, Jim usually doesn't bend over backwards to bring up people unless he thinks highly of them. So I think that's a good indication that the Eagles believe he has a lot of promise.
John McMullen, Eagles OTAs. Ronald Darby, as he mentioned, took his turn in the slot today. Do you have any Russel Douglas information, too? Because he's an interesting guy. I thought, when he was given a shot last year, he kind of performed, and then he kind of fell out of favor a little bit. So what do they think of Douglas moving into this year?
Well, he was on the first-team defense today, so he's going to get his shot. But he's strictly an outside cornerback because of his size. And I talked to him today because he got those first-team reps, and he indicated he's not one of that group that is going to rotate inside the slot. He's strictly an outside corner. And Jim Schwartz kind of intimated that at some point they might even look at him as a safety because of the size he brings. But that hasn't happened yet. Russel confirmed that. He has not worked out at safety. So he's strictly a right cornerback right now. And I think that's good for a young player to sort of master one role. There's no doubt he's going to make this football team. The question is he going to be sort of that fourth corner that doesn't play all that much unless there's an injury or if he's a real part of the rotation? And I think a lot of that depends on how quickly a guy like Ballsby develops. I think if that's the case, Russel's probably not going to play all that much in the base defense. But if it isn't the case, I think he'll get his opportunities.
John, how much in these OTAs do you really take away from, like, talent building and development, and how much do the Eagles put stock in? I mean, because it's like that catch-22. Well, it's just OTAs. They're just a helmet and shorts, but yet they're still trying to push the agenda, push the program, have guys come in and learn how the Eagle way is done. How much of that balance takes place?
Well, I think, there's sort of a wink-wink with the veterans, and it really isn't all that important for them, the guys who understand the scheme, the defense, how things are done in the league. I think their presence is more sort of leadership-based, as you indicated. How do you do things? And now what is a championship way in Philadelphia? Perfect indication of that is the past 2 days, Fletcher Cox and Nigel Bradham have not practiced. Just getting maintenance days, excused absences. Today, Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson did not practice at all. They don't need this stuff, to be honest. But it's very important for younger players, guys like Ballsby, and rookie players who are in the NFL for the first time, learning new offenses and new defenses. Shelton Gibson, the wide receiver from who was a rookie last year and kind of had a bad training camp but hung on because the Eagles thought he had some potential down the line. I mean, he admitted to me one of his issues was, he was a deep threat at West Virginia. He wasn't asked to run more than 2 or 3 pass patterns. And now he's in this complicated NFL offense where he's got to learn the entire route tree. And now he's sort of got his footing. He understands the offense better. He feels more comfortable. In turn, he's not thinking about things. He's catching the ball more effortlessly. So for young players, I think it's really important. And for veteran players, I don't think they need it other than to sort of set an example for those younger players.
Well, and that's something I then wanted to follow up with you about, because I guess in baseball, there's times where they'll say the hitting is ahead of the pitching because the pitchers are just coming back and starting to work out their arms to go deeper into games. Is there a division in football at this point, like OTA point, where the offense is ahead of the defense, or the offensive players are learning, or is it complicated for both sides?
Well, it usually varies from day to day. I mean, usually early in training camp, the defense tends to be ahead of the offense, and that's just the nature of the game. But when you don't have pads on, it changes, because obviously there's no real physicality unless you're the Baltimore Ravens and ignore the rules every year. But there's no intimidation going on from a defensive standpoint. And it usually depends on, are the quarterbacks hot one particular day, or are they not in another particular day? I thought, perfect example this week, we were here for 2 practices. I thought the offense got the better of the defense yesterday. I think the exact opposite today.
Yeah, I did see, and too, as far as the veterans, you talked about the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Nobody seems worried that Bennett wasn't there for any of these OTAs, which are all voluntary anyway. In fact, Jim Schwartz addressed that pretty directly and pretty quickly.
Yeah. Doug said, "Are you worried about Michael Bennett?"
Oh, that's it, Doug. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, at a reporter. Now, Michael's history is he doesn't really do much in OTAs, and he lives in Hawaii. So would you want to leave Hawaii to go to wherever you are, Seattle or South Philadelphia, to run around in shirts and shorts? So, look, I think it's good for veterans to be here just to set the proper example for the younger players. But when you do have a guy, and Darren Sproles fits into the same category, because Michael says some controversial stuff, so some people take a negative view of him, but Darren Sproles, on the opposite, is everyone knows he's a class act, and he doesn't show up to OTAs as well because he wants to spend time in San Diego with his family. And at this stage of his career, he's not getting much out of OTAs, and that's the same with Bennett, and everybody kind of knows it.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. So, yeah, the Darren Sproles thing, it's like Michael Bennett gets thrown under the bus or gets the criticism just because he says controversial stuff, but Darren Sproles supposed to be the ultimate teammate and the warrior and coming back for one more year, but he misses, and it's okay because of who he is.
Exactly. So, that's individual people, and it basically comes down to who they like and who they don't like. But I remember when Fletcher Cox wasn't here because he was holding out for his contract, not holding out because they're voluntary. So by definition, he can't hold out. He got a lot of criticism. And then when he got the big deal, he came in, but mainly because he was a highly paid player who was considered a leader on this team, not because he needed it. And it's a perfect example that he's had the last 2 days off because the coaching staff kind of understands that they don't really need one of their best 2 or 3 players busting as you-know-what in June. They need that in September and October, November, December.
John, Brandon Graham, ankle surgery, obviously, and he's in town, and you guys got a chance to talk to him about where he's kind of at after the end. A lot of guys hurt, but he's a pretty important guy.
Yeah, it's very important. And
crutches?
Little bit of a strange situation because the surgery came so much later than it probably should have. But Brandon kind of explained they were thinking it was going to heal itself, and it didn't. So they went in to clean it out. And he's still on crutches, still in a walking boot. So obviously he's not going to do anything in minicamp. And the hope is he'll be ready by training camp, even if it's a week or two in. And certainly they're not concerned about week one. But he didn't put up an interesting – everybody knew he was hurt in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. Everybody knew he wasn't 100%, but he also explained today not only did he have the bad ankle that required surgery, but because he was favoring that ankle, he pulled his hamstring in the Super Bowl. So he sealed the biggest play and sealed the Super Bowl biggest play in Eagles history with a bad ankle that needed surgery and to pull the hamstring. And he sacked the greatest quarterback of all time and stripped him.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
So that's a pretty good storybook ending, as I wrote on 973ESPN.com.
Yeah, that story just posted about a half an hour ago on Brandon Graham, and you can check out all of John's Eagles stuff at 973ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. And then an interesting story, John, is Terrell Owens, Hall of Famer, has decided he's not going to the Hall of Fame. Now, he'll be put into the Hall of Fame, but his speech will be saved for some time down the road, I guess.
Yeah, I was trying to I talked with Dama, who's the Eagles Hall of Fame voter today, as a matter of fact. We were trying to figure out if anybody who was alive that was set to be inducted into the Hall of Fame did not come to the ceremony. And he couldn't think of anybody. I can't think of anybody. Terrell Owens is just a weird, weird dude, and who knows why he does the things that he does. But that is very, very strange.
Yeah, well, he just essentially he put out a statement that essentially said, I appreciate it. And I saw Damo tweet that he thinks T.O. liked it better when he was kind of an outsider.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty evident he likes attention, and that's why he constantly talks about wanting to play in teams that he can help at his age, which is kind of ridiculous. And now, obviously, he complained about not being in Hall of Fame. He had a whole sort of constituency that was behind him. Now he's set to be inducted. Now he doesn't want to go to be honored. It's just, as I said, it's weird. And that, I think, describes – if you look at Terrell Owens' relationship with every quarterback he ever played with, I think you could understand. I understand here in Philadelphia a lot of people didn't like Donovan McNabb, didn't like his personality. He took T.O.'s side in that sort of feud. But remember, it followed T.O. throughout his career. If you look up some of the things he said about Jeff Garcia, for instance, I don't know a better word to use than weird. He's a weird guy.
John, how about the report out of New England? Tom Brady back on the field, but he might not have one of his bigger targets for the first month of the season. Reportedly, Julian Edelman facing a 4-game suspension for PEDs.
Yeah, I'm always interested on what the excuse will be. It seems to go to one is the tainted supplement route, which I often joke if that were the case, GNC would be the biggest drug dealer in the history of the world. But that's the one everyone seems to lean on. Like, it never surprises me, anybody who gets suspended for that type of thing. And, that's a bigger conversation. But I think, PEDs are a bigger part of sports than people realize, and they have been for a really, really long time.
All right, John, plenty of football, of course. Eagles mandatory next week?
Yes.
Yes, mandatory minicamp starts Tuesday of next week.
All right, we will have all of the updates on that. Don't forget, check out John's national NFL column at getmoresports.com. Johnny Mack here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, pal.
Thank you, guys.